I grew up in church. As a child, I was in Sunday school every week, then I switched to attending the regular services, then I joined a youth group, then I switched to a study group. There hasn't been any point in my life where I didn't attend church. Now, I wasn't a scholar or anything like that, and I was pretty much just an attendee, but after attending thousands of hours of lectures, I felt that I had a pretty complete understanding of Christianity. However, there's always a whisper in the back of my mind. It asked a particular question that I didn't have a good answer for. It was easy enough to ignore at a younger age, but as I got older, the answer never came, and the question got louder. It sounded a little something like, how do you know that Christianity isn't just a bunch of fairy tales? We have no evidence that any of it ever happened beyond some writings that could easily be made up. In fact, we have no evidence of anything like the miracles in the Bible happening any time ever. Isn't it possible that you've been brainwashed to believe something that just isn't true?
And what did I, an expert in the faith and a true believer in the way, have as a rebuttal?
I feel Jesus in my heart.
Not exactly a thrilling scientific argument.
Even though I shoved down my doubts every time they came up, they never went away. I kept hoping to hear some kind of answer in church, but there was just nothing. I mean, if there was concrete proof, surely they would have mentioned it at some point, right? Was there no actual evidence? Was I really just believing in fairy tales after all? I don't really know why I never looked up answers to my questions. Maybe I was scared of what I would find. Maybe I was just embarrassed that I'd spent my entire life believing in something without ever doing some real research into it. Maybe I was just lazy and didn't want to read a book. Whatever the reason, I told myself that if the answers were out there, I would have been told them already. Now, just because there's no proof for Christianity doesn't mean it's not real. And since I wanted to keep my religion, I decided I'd just hope that I was raised the right way. I'd keep going to church, keep going to study group, keep being a Christian. So I shoved the question down yet again to keep it from destroying my faith. But I think it already had.
Welcome to Louisville, Kentucky, baby. This city will be our home for the next 10 months. We'll be staying in a freshly renovated luxury apartment featuring 24-hour security, just a few miles from not one, but two Costco's. Downtown is the famous Kennedy Interchange, a road network so complex that it is universally referred to as Spaghetti Junction. Don't pick the wrong exit now, or you'll be banished to Indiana like the rest of them. Okay. Why was I talking about this? Oh, yeah.
So when I moved to Kentucky, I had no friends and no family with me, save for my sister, who was pretty much working every waking hour. So if I wanted a social life, I was going to have to build it from scratch. What better way to do that than to get connected with the local church? And I wound up liking it quite a bit. I joined the tech team as a volunteer camera operator, which meant I wound up watching every service twice in the front row. As I did that, I realized that the sermons were different somehow. I wasn't getting distracted as much, and I was absorbing more of what I was hearing. I figured that I would hear pretty much the same thing from any church I went to, but I was wrong. I mean, the principles and ideas were the same, but the way they were taught put them in a new light. The sermons at this church were usually delivered with a practical, tangible call to action. They treated the Bible like an operator's manual for daily life, instead of a theological textbook, which is the way I had always treated it. Christianity wasn't just a theory, it was literally a way of life. I realized I never had the solid understanding of Christianity I thought I did, and that awoke a curiosity in me I hadn't really had before. I wanted to answer my question, regardless of what that answer was. And that was the moment I turned from a spectator to an explorer. And it took me one trip to the bookstore and about 40 minutes of reading to realize that I am so stupid. The thing about popular things is that there tend to be other things about the thing. In the case of what is probably the most popular thing ever, the Bible, there's a mountain of resources covering every word of every verse of every chapter from the Bible from every conceivable perspective, and I had taken advantage of none of it. The first book I read is one that you're probably familiar with if you're a Christian. A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel is basically a baby's first Christian apologetics book that tackles the resurrection of Jesus through the lens of an investigative journalist. Was Jesus even real? Yeah, that's basically indisputable. Are the Gospels reliable at all?
They're about as reliable as we can expect an ancient document to be. Even if the arguments presented in this book aren't enough to convert every person who reads it, they're certainly enough to banish the idea that no intelligent person can be a Christian. Boom. That was an answer to my question. And if I'd been proactive about it, I could have had that answer years earlier. When I read this book, I became aware that I had been treading water for my entire life, trying to behave like a Christian when deep down I had no substantial basis for my belief. You can attend church every week for 20 years and still have blind spots. Now, at this point, I'd like to say that I jumped back into life with fervor and became obsessed with God and living out every day like Jesus, and everything was awesome in the end. But in reality, living in Kentucky had driven me insane. So it looked a lot more like me slowly putting the pieces back together over a course of a couple years. A few months ago, I got around to reading a second and a third book about Christianity. And no, you're not seeing double. These books are companions to each other, both written by Timothy Keller. Making Sense of God makes logical arguments for the existence of God and Christianity, although it does it from a broader, more theological perspective than A Case for Christ, which was laser focused on did this one thing happen, yes or no. The other book by Timothy Keller is The Reason for God, and it talks about God and Christianity from a moral perspective. Why would I believe in a loving, all-powerful God when there's so much evil in the world? Stuff like that. Both of these books are great reads in their own ways.
So once again, when I actively explored my faith, it was strengthened by what I found. The point I want to make is that there's more to your faith than what you'll learn by attending church for an hour a week. There's a vast trove of information compiled by geniuses over centuries at your disposal, so don't let it go to waste. When I first started reading some of this stuff, it immediately changed my faith for the better. So go out and seek answers to your questions. Engage with Christianity. Fill the gaps in your knowledge. Don't just be a spectator.
P.S. As much as I value these books, you shouldn't take them as gospel because they're written by humans who can be wrong. You should cross-check claims with the Bible wherever possible and avoid stuff that directly conflicts with it or seems like it's trying to bend a verse to fit a certain narrative. Okay, that's all.
Oh, dude, check it out. I got a second blueprint. Please, I'm eating.